Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, we're off the Motor City Madmouth, along with the X-Man, Xavier McKnight, and the fantasy football guy, Ryan Skolrud. Glad to have you guys on this live broadcast as we get ready for the weekend.
So, as always, it's great to be on the show.
Thanks. Great. Thank you for having us. It's always great to be on the show, and we hope everybody's ready for everything we're unpacking tonight.
Well, my dynamic duo's at it today, so I can guarantee you one thing that won't happen on this broadcast. I don't figure to lose my voice because you guys have a lot of wealth of information. I'm just looking to go out there and provide some insight, so you guys go ahead and take it away. And I don't know who's leading off, but...
Go ahead, Xavier.
Well, the NFL draft for 2020 is officially over. And what we learned, first and foremost, is I did not have a very good first round. That's the first thing we'll go ahead and we'll point out, because we told our listeners that we were going to address this. Now, me personally, I don't think I made bad picks, but I just didn't make the picks that the teams agreed with. Pretty much after the Bengals and the Redskins with the Joe Burrow and Chase Young picks, I was pretty much done after that, because the Detroit Lions kept their third pick and they selected Jeff Okudah. The New York Giants decided to select offensive lineman Andrew Thomas. Tua ends up going to the Dolphins. Justin Herbert goes at number 6. You'll remember, Scott, I had him falling all the way to number 18 in my mock draft. He ends up going number 6 to the Chargers. Derek Brown goes all the way to 7 with the Carolina Panthers. Isaiah Simmons falls to 8 to the Cardinals. So, personally, it was not a very good draft as far as my predictions go, but I believe that these teams did make the best selections for them. The only true selection of the first round I'm actually questionable about, believe it or not, it's not the Green Bay Packers selecting Jordan Love, which we're going to get into a little later on. It's actually the Philadelphia Eagles. That draft selection right there, that one just, that kind of just threw me off a little. Jalen Reagor out of TCU, when you had so many other promising wide receivers on the board. And I'm not saying that Jalen Reagor is not going to have a good career, but he was not a guy that many people had projected to go in the first round at all on most mock drafts. Ryan, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, with Reagor going before CeeDee Lamb, I with the Raiders picks, just how far CeeDee Lamb fell was just an absolute shock to me. I had him going up around, I think it was right around 10 or 11, I believe. Actually, I think I had him going to the Raiders. Although, if we look at typical Raiders picks when it comes to wide receivers, whether it's been John Gruden making the pick, or if it's been back in the old Al Davis days, the thing that they loved with their wide receivers was always speed, and that was always like the main thing that they looked at. And while CeeDee Lamb isn't necessarily slow, he's more of a big-bodied, go up and get him type of wide receiver. And so, that may not have exactly fit the profile they wanted. I'm shocked that CeeDee Lamb fell as far as he did. As far as kind of where I was with the draft and my mock drafts. Actually, for me, the first 6 picks were pretty close to right on. I had 1 and 2. I had the Detroit. There were some rumors like just before the draft started that Detroit actually wasn't going to trade the pick. So I went ahead and went with the Okudah there. Got that one right. I figured that the Giants, if they didn't trade, were going to get an offensive tackle. I just picked the wrong one. And then with Tua and Herbert, I didn't think, even with Cam out there, I didn't think that I want to keep saying San Diego, the LA Chargers would pass on Herbert. I figured that no matter which way it went, whether it went Tua to Miami and Herbert to the Chargers or the other way around, those two were going to be the next 2 picks at 5 and 6. Then after that, my entire mock draft fell apart. So I did pretty well through 6. And then after that, I was nowhere. But, with the Jordan Love pick, that was definitely interesting to see how they traded up to get him. We'll see what kind of an effect this has with the whole the front office and the coaching staff with Aaron Rodgers. So.
Well, you touched a little there on the Cam Newton thing, and I'll dive into that a little later. But I want to bring Scott into the conversation before we go to that point, because he texted me and he said he was very happy with the Jeff Okudah pick. But I'm pretty sure that the compliment stopped there. Am I correct, Scott?
No, not really, because you called C.J. Henderson. You said that one all along to Jacksonville, and you were right. So I think you did a really good job nailing that one. I thought you're...
Oh, no. No, when I said the compliment, I meant as far as the picks that the Detroit Lions made as a whole throughout their draft.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Well, but you know what? I'm going to pay you that compliment anyways. You nailed C.J. Henderson. So take that for what it's worth, and we'll go on to the next thing. Yeah, Jeff Okudah is a good pick. I felt all along when Darius Slay went ahead and left for Philadelphia, the Lions needed a impact player on defense, and I believe they definitely got it for sure. So, yeah, again, everything. Now, the one thing you kind of intrigued me a little bit was when you were going to go with that New England trade to the Lions and all the other activity there, but none of that came to fruition. I think that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia were not in a position, job security-wise, that they could make such a bold move, knowing that indeed they may only have 16 games left unless they can get this team expeditiously turned around. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, but then it's hard to pick trades, but that wasn't one I was prepared to go with. And I do believe that Matthew Stafford, to me, is a very good quarterback. Just surround a guy with some weapons and a halfway decent defense and a decent offensive line. Is that a lot for Detroit? Probably, but you know what? There are some urgent times back home in Motown.
What was real quick? I just wanted to ask, what was your thoughts again, Scott, on the DeAndre Swift pick? Considering that they just a couple years ago had the draft capital that they put into Kerryon Johnson.
Like that, because number one, you're not sure about Kerryon Johnson's health. Number two, the physique of DeAndre Swift reminds me a lot, I hate to make comparisons, of Barry Sanders, a 5'8" guy low to the ground who loses a few yards back in the backfield and can break one any day. So I like the pick. He's a good, low breakaway runner. And again, the Lions' bad luck with running back is their inability to go ahead and hit on these running backs. Now, I think one of the most intriguing picks was they snapped that running back from New Mexico State later on. I don't know whether he's a special teams guy, another insurance policy in the backfield. So I could see the Lions carrying 2 or 3 or 4 running backs if the kid from New Mexico State does. I really like the DeAndre Swift pack. I really do. I was hoping to get an impact runner. I was kind of hoping, because my significant other here is that Jonathan Taylor would go there, but no such luck. But DeAndre Swift, to me, is a fine running back, where the physical comparisons, at least, are there for Barry Sanders. And you know what? Sometimes some of those better picks occur in day 2 and 3, and then the undrafted free agents. So I'm on board with the pick, Ryan and Xavier.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a good pick there. And I want to touch on another team that, in my opinion, they had a very good the Indianapolis Colts. I believe they had a stellar draft, honestly.
I can't hear you, Xavier. You have to speak up. Can't hear you.
I'm jumping to a team now that I believe had a stellar draft individually, and that would be the Indianapolis Colts.
Okay.
Colts fans have absolutely nothing to complain about with how Chris Ballard, he just continues to get this thing right. And, let's run through the list of those picks that the Colts made there really quickly. So we have Michael Pittman Jr., a wide receiver out of USC. A lot of people probably don't know who he is if you didn't watch a lot of college football. USC is not what they once were, but he's going to be a good player for them. And also, I believe it was a good move because, Scott, as you said with the DeAndre Swift pick that the Detroit Lions made,
right,
in reference to the pick that the Colts made here with Michael Pittman Jr., T.Y. Hilton has proven that he can't be dependable just simply because of health issues. He misses a few games every single year, more than likely. I think that's just been the trend with him, unfortunately. He's a good player, just like Kerryon Johnson is for the Detroit Lions, but it's all about when he's healthy.
Right.
So they address the need right there.
What's the safe pick?
Underrated, Josh Jonathan Taylor, the running back out of Wisconsin. I was surprised that he fell that far. I thought that he would have been the first or second pick taken in the second round, but either way, I believe the Colts got one of the fields with the draft right here with Jonathan Taylor. We all watched him in Wisconsin. We know the great running back that he was when he was in college.
Right.
And I believe that this is going to turn out a lot better than the Monte Ball selection in Denver, because the comparison that we keep hearing there is, well, we saw what Monte Ball was when he was in college, and he didn't plan out in the pros. I don't know what he paid for Jonathan Taylor. He did take the offensive line to run behind. I like the pick of Julian Blackman, the safety out of Utah. But the pick I absolutely loved the most was Jacob Eason, quarterback out of Washington, being taken by the Indianapolis Colts. We know Philip Rivers is more than likely going to be the starter this year. I believe he only has 2 years left at best. One where he may have a chance to get back to getting up respectable numbers. But Jacob Eason will be the quarterback of the Colts' future now, more than likely. And he has a big arm. The problem with Jacob Eason is he's going to need a great offensive line to play behind. So this was the perfect team for him to go to in my opinion. I liked him here, or I liked him in Dallas. But I'm really very pleasantly surprised with what the Indianapolis Colts did, and I believe they have put themselves in a position to get back to being atop the AFC South division.
Well, having Frank Reich teaching the guy doesn't hurt anything either. We all know that Frank Reich definitely is an offensive-minded coach, so there's no doubt in my mind that Jacob Eason is in the best possible spot that he can be in. Jonathan Taylor, yeah, you're right, Xavier. I was kind of surprised that he dropped that low, but, again, the Colts certainly picked up a good value at that spot. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Michael Pittman Jr. I thought was a decent pick there. I got to see a little bit of him out here being a Pac-12 guy. So I had seen him. I thought that was a solid pick. The Jonathan Taylor one honestly surprised me a little bit. Honestly, what they could be looking at is the fact that Mac has had to deal with some issues with some leg issues. Has not been able to stay as healthy as maybe they have wanted him to, and so maybe having someone that could be a little bit of a bruiser, and has some great speed to go along with him, could kind of ease the load a little bit. And who knows? Maybe they go to kind of a split backfield type of thing, or it could be that Jonathan Taylor just plain takes over for Mac in that backfield. So I liked the move. I was surprised by it, and I think Taylor could have a phenomenal running career behind a very well put together offensive line. So that was definitely a surprise pick for me that I think that will pan out very well. And then again, you mentioned the Jacob Eason pick. Again, being a Washington Husky fan out here and having seen him a bit, one of the things that honestly people, I think the best comparison of him in the pros is Philip Rivers. Big arm now, or maybe Philip Rivers from his younger days, because he is very much a big arm type of guy. Has phenomenal arm strength. Was known for his squeezing passes into tight places. Seeing some of the throws that he was able to complete at Washington, when really he had no business throwing the ball there because of how tight a window it was for him, and making and getting the completion simply because he could get it in there that quick, was very cool to see. I think that he may struggle a little bit in the pros doing that, simply because the defenders are that much quicker, that much better. And one of the things that Eason struggled with a little bit up here in Washington was his accuracy, was touch. And so we'll kind of see how that goes, as well as he has been in the past, been kind of labeled one of those guys that isn't necessarily the hardest worker, has a little bit of trouble every once in a while with the work ethic. So, but but with I think a guy like Frank Reich and having Phillip Rivers ahead of him, hopefully those guys can really get to him and help him along the way. And I think that again with we're talking about that offensive line. With that offensive line being what it is, this could be one of the best positions that that Eason could have ended up.
Yeah, no.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. He has a chance, and I agree with Phillip Rivers' comparison too. So talk about the student being able to go learn from the teacher. This is the perfect situation for him, in my opinion. And let's address that other team that I said they could have possibly ended up on really quickly. The Dallas Cowboys, the team that actually selected CeeDee Lamb, and the team that did not select a quarterback at all in the draft. So what that tells me is, for now, we know that they are all in on Dak Prescott. Scott, what are just your thoughts on the CeeDee Lamb selection by the Dallas Cowboys and how they ultimately performed in this draft?
Great move. Now I hear he wants the number 88 for Des Bryant and Michael Irvin. Hey, if he's that good, let him have it. Yeah, you can never have enough great weapons. And the Cowboys obviously had their quarterback to begin with in Dak Prescott, and who else they have as their wideouts? Amari Cooper. That's not a bad start. Michael Gallup's not a bad player. Go out there and have as many wideout threats that you can get. Mike McCarthy's not afraid to throw the football, contrary to Matt LaFleur. Okay, but Mike McCarthy's done it. You have a good signal caller. You shore up that running attack, and the Dallas Cowboys look relevant. I have no problem with it. I think it was a good move.
What are your thoughts on how the Cowboys performed in this draft?
My exact comment as soon as I saw that they drafted CeeDee Lamb was we had a big chat going in with my Skull King writing staff, and with us, my first comment was as soon as that happened, I go, Dallas ends up with CeeDee Lamb. This is the most stupid offense I've ever seen. Right. Just the young talent that they have when you have an offensive line. I understand that they're dealing with I believe a retirement of their center. I believe they got a new center in the draft, but they do have enough veteran leadership on that offensive line to really keep a pretty good gel. And you have Dak Prescott, who has shown that he can be a very, very productive quarterback, throwing for as much as he did last year. And then you've got Amari Cooper, who can be, is back and forth, but for the most part, a very dynamic wide receiver with Michael Gallup, who can be dynamic as a number 2. And then you throw in CeeDee Lamb. It's a ridiculous offense with the amount of weapons that they have. If they can shore up their defense, I think that they're going to be extremely dangerous this next season.
So there's one weapon on that team that we totally forgot about, and that's Blake Jarwin, the tight end.
I'm not as sold on Jarwin as most are. I've analyzed him enough. I think from the fantasy perspective, that I think that he's better off. Always looking at things from a fantasy perspective. He's much more of a great football player than he is a fantasy player, because for him, his value comes from the fact that he will catch some balls here and there, does have some explosiveness, and can break up some big plays. But it's also his ability to be that sixth lineman and be able to block very well in the offense to open up things in other directions.
So what do you guys think of Jerry Jones's yacht? $250 million could buy a pretty good piece of real estate, let alone on the water. Who knows what his land residence look like?
Well, when I heard that Jerry Jones was going to be the main person in charge of the Cowboys draft and he was not going to have anyone oversee him, we knew that he was going to find some way to make a performance and a show out of it. And what better way to do it as a billionaire when you can do it on your own personal yacht? So, I can't blame Jerry for that. I do need to walk back one thing I did say earlier before we began this segment.
Sure.
The Cowboys did select a quarterback in the draft, but it was in the 7th round with the 231st pick, Ben DiNucci out of James Madison.
Yeah, so they didn't really select a quarterback.
Yeah, another arm.
You never know how this is going to pan out.
True.
That's just the thing. But, Ryan, you spoke about their defense. I like what they did with their next 3 picks following the CeeDee Lamb pick. I like Trayvon Diggs, the cornerback out of Alabama. I like Neville Gallimore, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. I like Reggie Robinson, the cornerback out of They really did a good job of addressing it. The thing about Gallimore is he's not even going to start right off the bat. But he's going to have a great opportunity to go in and learn from two seasoned veterans who have been Pro Bowlers and high performers in this league before, and Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy. So I believe he's going to get to benefit greatly just by getting to play behind those guys and getting to soak up all of the knowledge that they have. But I'm really excited to see what Trayvon Diggs and Reggie Robinson are going to do on the opposite sides of the field next year as the cornerbacks of the Cowboys.
Yeah,
I would definitely agree with you there. The thing about the defense, I mean, the defense for the Cowboys over the last couple of years has been pretty good in terms of the pass rush and stopping up the run, especially since they drafted Leighton Vander Esch and his just ability to be all over the field. Really, it's the defensive backfield that's been questionable, and like you said, they've addressed that with a couple of their picks. It'll just be interesting to see how all that kind of gels together, and if some of the younger guys can step up.
Yeah,
you brought up Leighton Vander Esch. Well, yes, go ahead, Scott.
I have no problem with the Cowboys taking a quarterback late in the draft. You don't know whether this guy's a scout team quarterback. You don't know whether he's a potential hidden gem later on. But James Madison University, if I heard you correctly, right, Xavier? Why not? I mean,
Yes.
He's a developmental project, and we've seen some of those 6-7 round picks turn out pretty well. Again, who knows what the situation is with the Cowboys, but there's nothing wrong with drafting an arm that down the road in training camp will take some of those reps, and you never know. You don't want to tax Dak Prescott's arm any more than you have to. Go ahead, Xavier.
Well, I'm glad that Ryan brought up Leighton Vander Esch because it should be noted that the Cowboys did not select a linebacker in this draft. And what that tells us is that the injury issues that he had with his neck going on late in the season last year, it appears that he has healed from those injuries, and he will be ready to go, and they should not be a concern going forward. So that's really good news for Cowboys fans.
Okay. Next.
So let's just move ahead and let's just go ahead and address the elephant in the room, and that would be the Green Bay Packers, and not just the Jordan Love selection, not just them moving up in the first round to trade up and make sure that they were able to get the pick that Matt LaFleur said he wanted to get in the first round. But it should be noted that the Green Bay Packers did not draft a wide receiver at all in the NFL draft. As a matter of fact, there was a notification that I received from Bleacher Report as we were going through the fifth round of the draft saying that the first 27 wide receivers have been taken off the board and the Green Bay Packers have not selected any of them. So we know exactly what this clear-cut message is sending here. All is not well in Cheesehead land with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers coaching staff and Packers management. So first, let me just begin by throwing this question out there. Is anybody surprised that the Packers ended up selecting Jordan Love or a quarterback in the first round with that selection?
Okay, well, let me take the lead on this one.
Go ahead, Scott.
Let me take the lead on this. When I saw the Packers made that trade to move up, then I knew they were going for a quarterback, and I knew that Love was there. Xavier, I believe that you're the one who mentioned that before, that you thought Love was going to go, number 3 to New England, or somebody did. So once we were in that 23 to 26 little window, and the Packers saw Love there, then at that point I understand you go after your potential signal caller. What many people have to understand is when Favre was 36 at the time or 35, and Rodgers slid down to the Packers, then you had to take the best player. Now, this is a situation where they drafted up, but they only drafted up just a few spots to get a guy who was considered a good prospect. Now, I got to agree with you, Xavier. I'm surprised that the Packers did not draft a wide receiver whatsoever. I don't know how much the running back in the second round is going to do anything to help things, and I know they drafted a tight end. But when I saw that they made that trade, I was not surprised. Guys, I have seen this drill way too many times. So, no, I wasn't caught off guard. Again, Rodgers will probably take the high road, show the guy what he's got to show him. But this is his job to lose until, for some reason or another, he doesn't want it. So I think a lot of people are making more out of it than it really is.
The only reason I would say that they're not necessarily making more out of this than there is, that this actually is an issue, is if we go back to last year, and the whole, not necessarily wanting Rodgers to make too many audibles, to actually go with the play calls that are sent in, and how it seemed like that was kind of loosened off as the season went on. That you saw that early in the season, you saw a lot of frustration out of Aaron Rodgers. It didn't help, obviously, that Adams went down early and missed a bunch of games early. But that being said, even then, you kind of saw him relax a little bit, and it looked like maybe the coaching staff eased off a little bit on the audible issue. I'm wondering if this is now them finally saying, okay, we're done with the crap. You're going to do it the way we want to do it, or you're gone.
Right.
And maybe that's what's going on. Now, going back to the wide receiver issue, I'm still stunned that they didn't take a wide receiver.
Right.
I'm not surprised that they got
Devontae Adams. Outside of Devontae Adams, they don't have a wide receiver for themselves to really go to. And the thing with Brian is that is, you can't convince me that the Packers feel that the wide receivers that they have outside of Devontae Adams are necessarily going to be good enough to get them over the hump, especially against the San Francisco 49ers, who had a spectacular draft and drafted a good wide receiver prospect themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that I can't see the Packers wide receivers being exactly what they would want. Now, it could be that maybe that they think that as long as Adams is healthy, that if Adams stays healthy, it's not an issue, and that they have enough secondary weapons. And then we go. Let's not forget they did take the running back A.J. Dillon,
right,
with their second round pick. I think that kind of goes to wondering. They've got two running backs that they have used very well over the last couple of years, especially switching up who's doing what, making sure that they're not overworking. Though Aaron Jones was absolutely phenomenal last year, not only running the ball but also receiving, and putting all that together. I believe that Jones is coming up on the end of his deal. I want to say he's coming up on year 4. I think this is year 4. I believe. I could be wrong. But I believe this is year 4 on his deal, and so it's definitely interesting to see how maybe they're looking to move on from Jones as well. There could be some internal stuff, or it could just be they don't know with how he's been. They could be looking at contract stuff and kind of where they're going to be at and whether or not they can hold on to him. And so maybe this is kind of their transition because they don't necessarily feel that that Williams, their backup, is a guy that could really step up to be the number one guy.
Well, Ryan, don't lose sight of the fact that this what was his name, A.J. Dillon from Boston College. He had a really good career with the up there. He really, really did. When you talk about his ACC records and all that stuff, so it's not like they got a running back that isn't any good. This guy here recorded a lot of yards in the Atlantic Coast Conference, so he got those yards in a Power 5 conference. So I wouldn't.
He's a bit of a banger too.
Oh, yeah.
He's 6 foot, 250 pounds. So he's got some weight to throw around. So it could maybe what they're doing is they want to use Jones more of a guy that kind of can catch the ball out of the backfield, can run the ball, but isn't necessarily a guy that they're going to want just wear out. Right. And can use a guy like A.J. Dillon to be able to run the ball up the middle a little bit more.
Well, I agree. I have no problem with that pick whatsoever. So a lot of those individuals out there that question it, you might be biting your tongue later. This may be the best pick that they have. I'm still not sure about Love, but I understand the reason why they did it. But again, some of these players that you give these premature drafts to may end up turning out better than we think. There's no exact science to this whole thing. So, while sometimes that knee-jerk reaction is, oh, they didn't get this guy, they didn't get that guy, you know what? You still have another couple months to build that roster to see what other players get cut. So the rosters are certainly, at 90 at this time, guys? Well, we'll find out when we get down to the final 55 or so to see who's really available when players get released. But, yeah, I think that Dillon is a wild card in this draft. And, another thing we should point out is, I'll bet Rodgers probably wishes he had McCarthy now, don't you think? Because Matt LaFleur certainly, again, Rodgers is a passing type of guy. And if things got a little frosty between Rodgers and McCarthy, although you can't change it, McCarthy's in Dallas, but LaFleur's been more of a grinded type of running back. I mean, coach that is, versus a prolific passing guy.
That's a great point, Scott, and that's exactly where I'm going to pick back up and chime in here. Because, Ryan, I can see why you would say that about the Aaron Jones deal and how the Packers could be looking at it. I don't think that's really this whole issue here at all. A.J. Dillon was a great running back at Boston College. I believe he's going to have a great career in the NFL. I believe he's going to do great things for that Packers offense. But this was clearly a message to Aaron Rodgers. We're not doing things the way you want to do them anymore.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the Jordan Love selection. Okay, Rodgers is 36 years old. You're doing the right thing here by moving on to get his potential successor, who's there, and he's a project quarterback right now anyway in Jordan Love. And he's going to more than likely get some great experience off of this, the way that Rodgers was able to get his experience by backing up Brett Favre and sitting behind him on the bench for a few years. But this is clearly a message to Aaron Rodgers. We're done doing this your way. You're going to do it our way. And if you don't, you're out of town. Because let's just keep this in mind. Don't you guys think if Aaron Rodgers fractures that collarbone one more time, he's done anyway?
Yeah, good point, Xavier. The one thing that we have to not lose sight of is Rodgers' recent injury history may have factored into this pick, too. I really do. They've tried different backups. They haven't worked. So if Jordan Love's able to learn anything, again, when Rodgers goes down, the sink goes down with the Packers and they don't make the playoffs. So having an insurance policy, let alone a long-term insurance policy, doesn't hurt. Remember, you had Favre, Rodgers, and potentially Love. That's not a bad way to continue efficiency at the quarterback position. So injury, I think, may have played a factor in this pick. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think the injury definitely could have played a factor, and I don't, Xavier, I don't disagree with you with the Dillon being a great pick and a great addition. And you're probably right that this was kind of them getting a great running back to add to the mix. If you look at where LaFleur came from the year before last, he was the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans, where he had a combination of Derrick Henry and Deion Lewis, and kind of that kind of hammer, kind of the thunder and lightning, I guess you could say, kind of a feel. And so that definitely, maybe he's looking for something like that. Here with Green Bay. Again, getting back to those grind them out roots of the offense, running the ball, using the pass when you need to. And if you look at Rodgers' efficiency, you think it would actually be better for him anyways because of how efficient he is if you put a better running game around him so that he doesn't have to throw it 50 times in a game.
True. Good point.
And then at the same time, you're also protecting him from injury because, again, he's not dropping back so often.
Another good point.
Well, yes, Brian, I agree with you on all of that. But just the fact that the Packers did not select a wide receiver at all in this draft, that just tells me that Aaron Rodgers and his time there is on the clock.
Yeah, agreed.
We've heard for years that Aaron is a difficult person to work with within the organization. We've heard that come out now for years. And, Scott, you brought up the Mike McCarthy thing there.
Yeah.
And I'll just piggyback off of that simply just by saying this. The term and the usage of the phrase and the sentence, be careful what you wish for, is in full bloom right here. Rodgers,
I definitely agree.
He wanted Mike McCarthy out the door. He wanted a new coach. The Packers went and got him a new coach, and now he has a coach who is more focused on taking the ball out of his hands as opposed to letting him control the offense. So, be careful what you wish for. you get what you get at this point. But this is clearly a message by the Packers coaching staff and the management that, hey, we feel that we have surrounded you with more than enough talent to go out and get the job done. We have upgraded the defense. Russell Wilson doesn't have multiple Pro Bowl perennial wide receivers. Drew Brees doesn't have multiple perennial Pro Bowl wide receivers. And these guys continue to get to the playoffs year in and year out. Find a way to get it done. And if you can't do it, then nice knowing you. That's just how I feel the message came off across here. I could be wrong, but, I mean, it's just too many things that point to that for me because you know the Packers need a second wide receiver to go along with Davante Adams. And yet they did not take him. The wide receiver that they have lined up now beside Davante Adams in that lineup is an injury-prone Devin Funchess.
Right.
That tells me all I need to know about the direction that the Packers are going in for the future with this organization.
Right. Well,
it could also be that they actually do feel highly enough about Alan Lazard and what he was able to do last year. Again, he's much more of that slot type of guy that, that can, kind of work the intermediate routes over the middle. He's not the Davante Adams type. So it could just be that maybe they feel comfortable enough that if they're going to run the ball, having a guy like Alan Lazard who can run the slot, having Adams on the outside, and then just kind of picking and choosing who they want to use, who they want to use, as their third wide receiver. Not that they have a whole lot to choose from, but maybe it could be that's kind of a route they want to go as well.
Let me point out a couple of things. Number one, Matt LaFleur, offense at Tennessee, was ranked 27th when he was the Titans. I know he had a pretty good run in with the Rams. Just want to get that fact out there. Number two, the Rodgers-LaFleur dynamic reminds me a lot of when Dan Marino went from Don Shula to Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson had the rings, and Dan Marino had to sacrifice personal stats because Johnson wanted to run the football. I think the similarities are so close between these two situations. Johnson wanted to run the football. He did. Dan Marino was concerned about throwing the football. Don Shula gave him the opportunity to freelance. Johnson didn't. So, do you guys see relative comparisons between these examples?
Somewhat. The issue, though, is when you talk about the Tennessee Titans offense being 22nd under LaFleur, you also had a constantly injured Marcus Mariota as his quarterback.
Right. True.
So he was in a way he was kind of handicapped on that.
Okay.
But the run game usually, for the most part, did a pretty decent job of keeping them in games.
Right. Well, good running game.
I see exactly where these comparisons come into play here because simply, I'll just bring it up to here. When you talk about those Dallas Cowboy teams that Jimmy Johnson was the coach of that went on to win all those Super Bowls in the 1990s, you look at the basis on how they went to go do it. Strong defense, run and pound the football, give it to Emmett, let him take off. We'll fit in Troy and we'll fit in the other wide receivers and the tight end. We'll fit that part of the game plan in. But the basis of the offense is going to be built around give it to Emmett. And, I'm not sure that many people actually realize that. Because, Scott, would you agree with me when I say this, not to get off topic here? But I have to bring this point up since we just brought up the Jimmy Johnson and Dan Marino factor and, what I'm saying here with how the Cowboys offense is mainly playing. Would you agree with me when I say that I believe that we actually did not get a chance to see how great Troy Aikman as a quarterback actually could be?
Yep.
Oh, no doubt about it. What are you talking about? He went ahead and, he had Emmitt Smith in the backfield. I'm sure that Troy Aikman's yards could be a whole lot more, but he wouldn't trade those Super Bowl rings for a few extra yards. He got to the Hall of Fame anyways. It didn't really matter. And, yeah, great point, Xavier. No question about it.
So, yes, that's just the point that I'm saying there. But Jimmy Johnson and like you said, when he went to Miami, he had the rings. Dan Marino didn't.
Right.
So that's a great point there. But, Ryan, I hear what you're saying about Lazard and how he stepped up in the absence of Davante Adams last year. I just don't believe that's the case here. I believe we are officially now at the start of continuing to now hear about more friction and more things coming out of Green Bay. And it won't surprise me that if around this time next year we start hearing rumors of Aaron Rodgers wanting out of Green Bay.
Well, Brett Favre made that very clear all week that he thinks that Rodgers will be heading out of town. Right now, the contract is not tradable. But, 1 or 2 years, I definitely see Rodgers going somewhere else if indeed he wants to. And see, he probably could wind up, might be San Francisco in his backyard, for whom they probably regretted not drafting him in the first place.
Yes, I definitely agree with that because, even though Jimmy Garoppolo was able to be the quarterback of a team that was able to get to the Super Bowl last year, we're going to have to see him get his numbers back to where they need to be to live up to the contract that he had. Speaking of the 49ers, let's touch on their draft a little. When I look at what the 49ers did in their draft with the prospects that they drafted, also the trades that they made to acquire more players in the league that are going to continue to improve their team, I just simply say this. The rich continue to get richer. They lost DeForest Buckner because they traded him to the Indianapolis Colts in the offseason. No problem. We'll just draft Javon Kinlaw with the 14th overall pick. And I believe that's going to be a great pick for them. Scott, one of the things I said with the 49ers that I did see that they were going to put a focus on was trying to get a wide receiver early on. Because when you look at the team that they couldn't get past, it was the Kansas City Chiefs. The ultimate problem there was they didn't have enough speed on the field to keep up with Kansas City. Well, they addressed that need as well with the 25th pick, drafting Brandon Ayuk.
All right. Well, again, you said it yourself. Emmanuel Sanders leaves. You got to get a replacement for him. They did. Absolutely.
I think one of the...
Go ahead.
Well, so what I was going to say was with the one of the things that to definitely look at with what San Francisco did was I think the main thing for them was the trade that they made in order to get Trent Williams to kind of help solidify the line. They also drafted McKivitz out of West Virginia. I want to say in the 5th round to try to get some more offensive line depth. Because I think the offensive line in terms of the pass protection was one of the issues that caused problems for Jimmy Garoppolo last year. Because if you look at it, when Jimmy Garoppolo was getting some pressure on him, that's when he had the biggest issues. I mean, you look at the main game that a lot of people look at to show just kind of how he folded last year. I mean, yeah, you've got the Super Bowl, but was the Seahawks game in San Francisco on the was it Monday night or Sunday Night Football, where the Seahawks and Jadeveon Clowney were able to get to him and throw him off so much just by applying. I mean, they hit him once or twice, and then after that, all they had to do was just get near him and put a hand in his face, and his accuracy was all over the place. So I think if they can having Trent Williams really help them out, and if they can make sure that their offensive line is solid, I think that's because they have a very good defense. That's the thing I think will help their offense that much more, is just the protection for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Hey, Ryan, I'm actually surprised that trade got pulled off during the draft, to be honest. What did they do, get a 5th in this year's draft and then a 3rd in next year's draft?
A 3rd in next year's draft, yes.
Right, so you're talking about a major trade that got pulled off in the middle of the draft, and Washington made the best deal that they possibly could. And obviously John Lynch saw the retirement of Joe Staley, I think it is.
Yes.
So he had the foresight, and to pull that trade off with Trent Williams, who's reunited with his own coach, that was brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, for those that don't know how to spell, brilliant. I liked it. Good, right move by the 49ers.
I like the pick too. The only reason I would just kind of maybe pause just a little on it is because Trent Williams missed a year of football last year because of the contract disputes with the Redskins.
Right.
But I believe this will be a lot different than it was with the Le'Veon Bell situation. I just believe he's going to be extra motivated to go out there and prove the Redskins and ultimately a guy who is now unemployed in the league, Bruce Allen, prove them wrong on what he could do. And 2 more things I have to say before we close off this segment. Well, 3 actually. Scott, what do you make of the San Francisco 49ers trading Matt Breida to the Miami Dolphins? Did Brian Flores and Chris Greer not have a great weekend last weekend, or what?
Oh, without a doubt. And while you're talking about Breida, may I bring up Tua, please? Okay. First of all, the Breida trade, they definitely have some depth at that position. They needed it. Anything the Dolphins are doing, I think this is a 2-year process from this point on. So the Breida move, I think, was a solid move. Was it a standout move where you got a real premium running back? No, but they addressed a lot of needs. Heck, they had a lot of draft choices. I don't know how many of these guys will make the team, but you never know. Many, I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of them end up making the team, as they continue this rebuild around Tua. So the Breida trade was good. Let me add Tua, if I may, okay? Number one, the Dolphins, I think, made a good move taking Tua because either Tua or Justin Herbert. They were thinking about tanking for this guy last year, but he fell into their laps at 5. I think it's a good pick. You got Ryan Fitzpatrick as your bridge quarterback, so Tua's not in any hurry to play. So I think the Miami Dolphins will make out bandits with this Tua pickup.
Oh, not only that, Scott. The Tua pickup, that was sensational. Here were the other sensational pickups that they made in this draft as well. Austin Jackson, offensive tackle, USC. Robert Hunt, guard, Louisiana Lafayette. Solomon Kinley, guard, out of Georgia. Not only did they draft their quarterback for the future, but they're making sure that they're getting his protection as well going forward. I mean, you talk about, I agree with you, this is a 2-year process going forward. Maybe 3 at the most. But I see 2 years. I am very excited to watch the Miami Dolphins from this point forward going next year because I love everything that they did in the draft. I love everything they did in the offseason. I even love the selection of the cornerback that they drafted with their last pick of the first round. And I know that's kind of telling because you would say, well, why would they draft a cornerback that high? They don't need those guys. They already have a great cornerback there in Xavier Howard. They signed Byron Jones in the offseason. This is a guy you can probably insert as your nickel cornerback. And we know that Brian Flores is a guy who is all about defensive football. That is what he has built his hat on. But I am excited to watch the Dolphins. Kudos to Brian Flores and Chris Greer for the job that they did in this draft.
What about you, Ryan?
Ryan, your thoughts?
The Miami Dolphins definitely had a very good draft. Kind of mentioning, I was going to throw in real quick about the Matt Breida trade.
Yeah.
I think and kind of coming back a little bit towards San Francisco, I think it showed that San Francisco has a lot of faith in Raheem Mostert, as well as obviously Tevin Coleman being one of the running backs for Shanahan in Atlanta. This could be that they have enough faith in Jerick McKinnon actually being healthy and coming back, that they felt that they could move on from Breida. Breida has had, some issues of his own. Now going to where Breida fits in at Miami, I think that he is a good kind of catch the ball out of the backfield type to go along with Jordan Howard. I think that is a good put together. Jordan Howard being more the downhill, kind of a bruiser type back, and allowing someone like Breida kind of around the outsides, I think is going to help kind of both of them and could provide some good stability in that run game for Miami. And like you said, going back to the offense, the offensive line, finding the protection for Tua, it may take a little bit for that offensive line to gel, but getting those. All that offensive line help is only going to be, is only good news for Tua after they drafted him.
All I'm going to say is this last thing before I go back to the last 2 points I wanted to make on the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
When you heard Roger Goodell say right before the Austin Jackson selection, we have good news for Tua. That's all you needed to know about what the Miami Dolphins were doing with that selection and, just what they have done in this regime overall. We are a long way removed from the Ryan Tannehill era and signing Ndamukong Suh to the bad contract and all of that stuff. The Miami Dolphins are officially back on track. They are taking steps in the right direction, and I cannot wait to watch this team going forward next season and seasons after that. Last 2 points I want to make on the San Francisco 49ers. Going back to the Trent Williams trade, Guys, well, I guess we're a long way removed from 8 years ago when the Seattle Seahawks and Washington Redskins played each other in the playoffs, and afterwards, Richard Sherman and Trent Williams got into a scuffle after the game.
I've seen video of that over and over and over again. It's hilarious.
You have, yeah. I'll bet you have. Go ahead, Xavier. You got some more points about 49ers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And my last point that I'm going to make on the 49ers is about Joe Staley. Kudos and a congratulations to him on a great career. And also just a class act move, the way that he knew he was going to retire and he kept his secret so that the 49ers could do what they had to do to upgrade at that position. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, because if he had said something, then it would have obviously put a little more pressure on San Francisco, and very well could have pushed up the asking price from the Redskins, knowing that they desperately needed Trent Williams.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, Xavier. Thanks for bringing that up. So I got a few things I'd like to bring in here as well, if I may. Okay.
Go right ahead.
All right. First of all, I did predict Jalen Hurts would go to Pennsylvania, but I thought Western Pennsylvania with Pittsburgh, not Philadelphia. I had the wrong Pennsylvania city. What are your thoughts about the pick to Philadelphia? I know they booed Santa Claus, and they go ahead and boo Donovan McNabb. Are they booing this pick?
Ryan, you go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, this was an interesting pick for me. I was not expecting this one.
Nobody would.
They signed Carson Wentz to the bigger deal a couple years ago. Wentz has not been able to stay healthy.
Right.
With how many concussions alone he has had to deal with, let alone he's had the torn ACL, he's had the rib issues. So it could very well be that they're working on the transition already. Just again because of injury history, and so that could be one thing that we're looking at. With the play calling that they make in Philadelphia, and just Doug Peterson being a bit of a gambler himself, I can see them using two quarterback here and there, two quarterback type formations, and maybe seeing how they can get Hurts' athleticism on the field. That being said, I think more than anything, I think this speaks more to Carson Wentz's durability than anything. That I think that if they really wanted to have a solid backup quarterback in case Wentz went down, and if he goes down or if they decide to move on for him, they have a guy that could very well play the same type of game that Wentz does, and fit into their system very well. So as far as Hurts goes, I think that's probably the way overall to look at it. I think that he'll fit in well in Philadelphia. I think that Wentz's days in Philadelphia are numbered simply because of the fact of his injury history and how beaten up he has gotten over the years.
Well, let me add on that, okay? First of all, then, Xavier, you can take over. The injury history has a lot to do with it, and yes, Doug Peterson's the type of guy that can develop anybody quarterback. But remember a guy by the name of Cordell Stewart, okay? They had packages in there where you need a bit more mobility. This has Cordell Stewart written all over it as well. Anytime you have a guy that is very mobile like he is, then there's a lot of different ways to interject him in the offense. And this is another headache for potential defensive coordinators because they don't know what signal caller is going to be under center in any given situation. So for all those defensive coordinators, you can go to Walgreens, or you can go to CVS, or any of your grocery stores because you're going to need a lot of Tylenol. Go ahead, Xavier. What's your take?
Well, I agree with everything that you guys said about the Philadelphia Eagles and this selection here. Carson Wentz could be on the clock. They could decide to use Jalen Hurts the way that the New Orleans Saints use Taysom Hill in their offense. But I'm going to address more of the Pittsburgh Steelers here. I'm absolutely disgusted and disappointed with the Pittsburgh Steelers for how they did in this draft, not addressing a need that they have at quarterback. You might not need a quarterback immediately with Ben Roethlisberger coming back. We don't know how he's going to come back. We don't know know if he's going to be the Roethlisberger of old. My guess would be that he will not, with age and the injuries that he's piled up over the years. Here's a recap of the Pittsburgh Steelers 2020 NFL Draft. Chase Claypool, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. I like him. Alex Highsmith, linebacker out of Charlotte. We'll see what he can do. I haven't really seen much of him. Anthony McFarland, running back out of Maryland. He has a good offensive line. He can definitely do some things for you. Kevin Dotson, a guard out of Louisiana. I like him, too. He performed well in college. Antoine Brooks Jr., safety out of Maryland. He's a hard-hitting safety. And Carlos Davis, a defensive tackle out of Nebraska. What do all of those picks have in common that I just named off? None of them are a quarterback. And there's no way that you can sell me on Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges being the future of the franchise at that position, unless say Ben Roethlisberger were to go down again. Here's the only good news for the Steelers in all of this. There are still some quarterbacks out there that they can add to their team if they act fast enough. That would be Andy Dalton or Cam Newton. But I'm absolutely disgusted that the Pittsburgh Steelers did not address a need they're going to have at quarterback going forward.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they didn't address that position in the draft either. There were some good quarterbacks there. I actually had Jalen Hurts targeted there, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, he was in Pennsylvania, but he, instead of Western Pennsylvania, ended up going to Eastern Pennsylvania. So, yeah, Xavier, I'm with you there. I was kind of surprised the Steelers didn't grab a signal caller. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, the Steelers not grabbing a quarterback with the injury history of Ben Roethlisberger, and then we go back to the fact that just you look at what this injury was this last year. It was a non-contact injury. It was like a torn tendon in his elbow. He didn't get. He kind of got bumped a little bit on that hit, but he had been having already some elbow discomfort from the week before. And so this was something that I think that just, in week 2 was aggravated enough that, it's shown that he's actually did need surgery. They are not, at his age, and again, with an elbow type injury like that, I don't see him coming back to the point of really, he could be very productive, but I don't see him being, I don't see him being there much longer. And maybe again, like you said, Xavier, maybe they're looking at one of the quarterbacks that's still available, like a Dalton or a Cam Newton. I think that would be the best option for them. I just don't. I'm amazed, honestly, that they didn't grab a quarterback, unless for some reason they know that they're not in a position to make the playoffs this next year. With some of the additions that that other teams have made in the AFC, that they're okay to quote unquote tank this year, and they like someone like that could be coming up in this next year's draft.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't see the Steelers trying to tank at all. I don't see them trying to tank at all. Sorry, Scott, not to cut you off there.
Oh, that's all right.
I actually would like to see Andy Dalton in that offense. I believe he would come in and he would be a burst of energy. Because if I'm just being totally honest with you, I think Ben Roethlisberger is more on the verge of being an unmitigated disaster to being a superstar quarterback when he comes back. I'm just being that 100% real with you because he's had so many injuries throughout the course of a Hall of Fame career that he's had. I don't believe he's going to be anywhere close to it. And he doesn't have an Antonio Brown or a Mike Wallace or a Hines Ward to throw the ball to anymore. We don't know if Juju Smith-Schuster is a true number one wide receiver yet. So that's also why this was concerning. And, we have enough on tape to know that Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges are not going to be the answer going forward. Yeah. So I'm just very disappointed in what the Steelers did. And hopefully they are able to nab up Andy Dalton sooner than later because I believe he would actually be a great fit for that offense.
First of all, Xavier, you can cut me off anytime you want when you take the words out of my mouth. Okay, just remember that. You can do that. I have no problem with it. Number one, I don't associate the word tanking with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Never associated it at all. Number two, why is Andy Dalton a good fit there? Jeez, guys, he played in the division. You don't know. You know what the heck the guy can do. You faced him twice a year. Hello, there's familiarity there. So yeah, I don't care. I think you're right. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't tank. They might have some years that are 6-10, 7-9, off years, but they don't tank. They've had too many. They've had only 3 coaches in the last 50 some odd years or whatever. So, and they don't fire coaches. They don't tank. They don't fire coaches. Andy Dalton's been in their division. They know what he can do. But again, Xavier, the key word that you said is if they can get him fast enough. We don't know how. We don't know exactly how aggressively the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to pursue him. The New England Patriots would be a great place for Dalton as well. So if I were the Steelers, I would move very quickly because there's no question Andy Dalton's a fine quarterback. All he needs is a good situation. So I'm with you all the way, Xavier. I really am. If you're not going to draft a quarterback and you've got a guy that you know very well, and as far as I'm concerned, you go out there and you snap him up as quickly as you can.
Now,
Right?
let's go from one AFC North team to the next.
Well, Ryan, what do you think?
The Cleveland. Okay.
What do you think?
I'm in agreement with you guys. I think that Dalton could fit in well at Pittsburgh. Honestly, I think the best spot for Dalton though is New England, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because of his style, I think that he would flourish under a guy like Bill Belichick.
No doubt about it. All right, Xavier, go ahead. Sorry.
So now let's touch on how the Cleveland Browns did in the draft. I'm not going to speak on the Ravens and the Bengals in this draft, but I like to speak on the Cleveland Browns because, once again, I believe they had an outstanding draft. But when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be, can Baker Mayfield keep his mouth shut, and can they overcome organization dysfunction? And do they finally have a coach who will not get fired after at least 1 or 2 seasons? I believe all of those could be real possibilities. But let's just speak on what they did in the draft. I like Jedrick Wills, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. I believe he was the best offensive tackle prospect, at least in my eyes he was. They addressed the need there. They needed to get a left tackle. They were able to get their right tackle in Jack Conklin in the offseason. I like what they did there. I like Grant Delpit, the safety out of LSU. Talk about putting him in there with a secondary. Cleveland Browns are going to have a loaded secondary going forward. I like Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle out of Missouri. He gave SEC teams an issue, especially sometimes the running backs coming out of the backfield. Jacob Phillips, the running back out of LSU. I like that move. Harrison Bryant, the tight end out of Florida Atlantic. We'll see if he makes the team. They're pretty crowded at that position right now. Nick Harris, the center out of Washington. Ryan, I'll ask you for your thoughts on him by you being a Washington Huskies fan and you being in that area. But the last pick they made, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the wide receiver out of Michigan, he's a sleeper.
Oh, yeah.
He's underrated, and I believe that he could very well end up being a huge part of this offense going forward because we don't know what's going to happen with Odell Beckham Jr. They're saying they're not going to trade him. They're saying he's going to be a Brown. I'm not 100% sold on that. But, Ryan, can you first just educate us a little more on Nick Harris and what you believe he could potentially bring to the Cleveland Browns?
Nick Harris is a solid center. He's not your standout all-pro. I'd seen a few different sources rank him as one of the top 5 centers in the draft. Which I believe he was. It wasn't necessarily. I mean, center wasn't necessarily a huge need for a lot of teams. So I think that's part of the reason why he dropped down to the 5th round like he did. I thought he possibly could have gone, possibly in the 4th round. Depending on team need, possibly could have gone at the very, very end of the 3rd round. But I think going in the 5th round is solid value for him. He provides a bit of mean and nasty, in the run game. The Huskies had their top running back run for over 1,000 yards this year. He was one of the main cogs of the offensive line over the last few years for the guy that got drafted the year before last in Miami. He had run for 1,000 yards all 4 years of his college career, and so he's been a main cog in an offense that has had at least one 1,000-yard rusher for the last 5 years. He works well in the trenches. Is decent in pass protection as well. The Huskies have been okay in terms of their passing game the last few years, but mostly it's been along the along the run game. And so I think he provides enough protection in the pass game, but I think what he's better at is the being the mean and nasty in the run game to help out with the run game for Nick Chubb. But he's solid enough to provide the protection for Baker Mayfield up the middle.
All right. Now, Harrison Bryant's a guy that I'm very familiar with in Florida Atlantic. He'll be on an NFL roster next year. I think he'll make the Cleveland roster. I saw this guy do some things as a tight end that I haven't seen a tight end prospect do in a long time. So, yeah, I think he'll be fine in Cleveland. Xavier, you're right. Donovan Peoples-Jones was a victim of subpar quarterback play by Shea Patterson, who incidentally, by the way, signed an undrafted free agent contract with the New York Giants. I don't know if you know this, but you know it now. So I think he is going to be a sleeper. In fact, I heard in some mock drafts Donovan Peoples-Jones was going to go to the Packers, and I was looking for him to go there, and he didn't, and he would have been an upgrade to the Packers. So those two players, I'm glad you brought up Donovan Peoples-Jones, Xavier, because even though there's no smoke screen around Odell Beckham, he's a guy I'd be watching out for, without a doubt.
Yeah, I believe he's going to be one of those late late round picks in the draft. I believe he's going to make the Cleveland Browns roster, and I believe he's really going to be a difference maker going forward. And when you say what you say about Harrison Bryant there, what that makes me think about is Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns,
right,
coming from the Minnesota Vikings organization, and maybe he sees some of Al Rudolph in him potentially.
Right. Exactly. Yep. No doubt about it, Xavier. That's what I think. You got Stefanski coming in from Minnesota. You have a kid like Bryant available, and all of a sudden the comparisons are there. Now, will they be a little premature in terms of the comparing the players? No, but the styles and the fit, not premature at all.
Okay, and the last team I want to address in our draft recap, and that would be the New England Patriots. And this is not going to be a PG King review going forward, at least on my end. I'll go ahead and say that right now. I don't believe the New England Patriots had a very good draft. I don't believe they addressed any of their true immediate needs. As they haven't had good NFL drafts in the past few years, but this is Bill Belichick. He's arguably considered the greatest coach of all time. I know some people think that's questionable. I'm one of them because there have been other great coaches throughout the history of the game who you can also give that moniker to. One who once resided in Miami, Florida as the head coach, who does not get the respect that he deserves. But that's a story for another day. Listen, Kyle Duggar out of Lenore-Rhine, I've never seen him play. The draft experts, they gave the Patriots an A for that, but clearly the Patriots wanted to draft the safety out of Alabama that was taken, the selection before that.
Okay.
What would you guys say to that?
Well, let me just address the New England Patriots draft as a whole if I can, all right? If they sign Andy Dalton like we anticipate they will, then the Dalton signing doesn't make the New England Patriots draft look as bad. Bear in mind, Brian Lewerke, an undrafted free agent, had a decent career at Michigan State. So, he certainly gets an opportunity. We don't know enough about Stidham anyway, so maybe they know something more than we know about him. And then, of course, Brian Hoyer is nothing more than a safety valve. So if they sign Dalton, the draft doesn't look as bad. The player you mentioned, I've never heard of him, so I don't have anything to comment on him there. So, we've talked about this before, Xavier. I don't think that the Patriots are going to be a much more than a 6 or 7 win team unless Andy Dalton is your quarterback. That's what I think. Then you better make sure you're surrounding some other playmakers around him. But Andy Dalton is a wild card here to hide the deficiencies of this draft. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I mean, one thing about Kyle Duggar is in a lot of rankings, you look at where the Patriots took him. They took him the fifth pick in round 2, which is pick 37. There were a lot of outlets that I've seen that have Kyle Duggar in that 35 to 45 range. So he fits within the range of talent that prospect where some of the quote unquote experts had him. So for that, I'm not so bummed about the pick, but I do believe that they probably wanted the kid out of Alabama the pick before. Overall, on their roster, what this kind of draft reminds me of, or is more the early days of Brady in New England, where it was about the defense and running the ball well, and basically having their quarterback, at the time was Brady, kind of a quote unquote game manager. You look at what they've done with this offense. They don't have a whole lot of weapons. I mean, really, it's in terms of the offense, it is Julian Edelman. You've got the running back situation with however many running backs they've got with Burkhead and White, Sonny Michel, and however they decide to use that, and then with the rest of the receiving core, you've got some undrafted free agents. Along with N'Keal Harry, who really didn't get involved last year due to injury issues. So it's looking like this may be more of a run-heavy type of offense, keep everything close, because they drafted 2 tight ends. The last time that New England drafted 2 tight ends was the years that they took what was it? It was Gronk and Aaron Hernandez.
Right.
So you've got that. Again, they are close-range type ball catchers that also can help protect to help with the run game and protect the quarterback. You get a couple of defensive players, linebacker, edge rusher. You get the safety with their first pick, another linebacker, later in round 6, and then 3 of their last 4 picks are offensive linemen.
Right.
So take out the kicker, and of their last 6 picks, 5 of them are offensive line or tight end, which to me screams protect the quarterback.
Right.
And use the defense. I think that's what they're going to go back to focusing on. It's their defense. You look at how good their defense was last year. Now it showed some cracks later on as the season went on.
Right.
But overall, their defense was what was really doing it for teams, so that their offense didn't have to be productive, and they were still going to win the game.
Right.
So I think they're going to go back to quote unquote the small ball of football, and I think that they've kind of set themselves up to revert back to defense, run the ball, protect the quarterback, don't make him have to do too much, and win games that way.
Yeah, game manager is what you're talking about. Just throw the passes that you have to do, and then let the running. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that approach. It keeps you in a lot of games. You have a good defense can make up for the lack of an offense. There's no question about that. What do you think, Xavier?
Well, I can understand why Ryan would take that viewpoint with it, because, listen, I believe Sonny Michel is a much better running back than how he's performed the past few years. The Patriots' lack of tight end play and an offensive line, that is something that they did slightly address in this draft. But I'll just simply close out this segment by saying this. I said that I would wait until after the draft was over to give what my predictions for the New England Patriots would be.
Okay.
Now I'll simply say this. Unless they sign Andy Dalton, I am sticking to my 6-10 prediction. And to be honest with you guys, that is simply just out of respect for Bill Belichick. If it ends up being a worse record than that, I won't be surprised.
Right. I'm with you. Okay. All right. I want to.
And before we close this thing out entirely, Joe Burrow is officially the new Tiger King, going from the LSU Tigers to the Cincinnati Bengals. And as we've alluded to many times throughout this broadcast, and if you're just joining us, Andy Dalton is no longer a Cincinnati Bengal. Joe Burrow has the keys to that offense. And I like what the Bengals did in their draft. I'm not going to go knee-deep into it like we did some of these other teams. I like what they did in the draft. I just don't have a lot of expectations for them next year because they're undergoing a complete rebuild.
All right. I've got a few points before we close out the broadcast. Okay, I'm going to throw them your way. Item number one. Okay, this is just a personal thing. The last time the Miami Dolphins selected a quarterback that high in the first round was Bob Greasy in 1967, who was number 4 overall. Do I think Dan Marino will let his number be unretired for Tua to use it? I would think probably not. I wouldn't blame Dan if he didn't. He would use another number. Item number 2. I like what the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders did when you had Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs as your wide receiver, because you can see by the trend that Kansas City has a very explosive offense, and they're just trying to do what they've got to do to maintain. Number 3, okay, I want you guys' opinions on this. The NFL went ahead and raised $100 million for COVID-19. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I thought it was great that they, I think the way that they went about it, especially what was it with I think it was more of the Bud Light thing with the boo the commissioner to help raise the funds as well. With it going to it with the online draft, there was, that people are booing the commissioner from their living rooms as they're watching. So I thought that was I thought the way that they were able to go about it and the way they went with it, was very creative, and obviously, the fact that it raised as much as it did was great to see.
What about you, Xavier?
It was a great gesture by the NFL. They did a great job addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, raising all of the money that they were able to raise, and also, it was a very entertaining draft. But there were moments throughout where you saw multiple moments of where there were moments of silence or lots of reflection on just what everybody is going through with this pandemic, not only in our country but around the world. So just kudos all around to the NFL for how they handled this entire situation.
All right, another key stat, 55 million people watched it, a record-setting draft. I think that was unbelievable, and I think there might be certain parts of the virtual thing that might be incorporated in future drafts. I think that was unbelievable. What about you guys?
I think that they'll stick.
Believe that. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, I think that they're still going to stick with the green room, but I obviously think that they're going to do a lot more with the phone cameras in the houses, especially moving into day 2 and day 3. I think they're going to do a lot more of that. I think that they'll still have the green room with maybe not as many of the players invited for that. But I think that seeing the emotions of a lot of these guys, especially the first round picks, being able to see them with their families as those picks were made, and not just in the green room, getting a hug from their mom and dad and then moving up, but seeing their whole family all together with them was really cool to see.
So Ryan and Xavier, what are your thoughts about the number 13? Do you think that Dan Marino would allow that number to be unretired for Tua, or do you think that Tua needs another number? Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
I don't believe he should. Tua should be forced to go in and select a new number and build his own legacy.
Yeah, I think so too. And one other note that we should talk about: Jameis Winston signs with the New Orleans Saints. Good move or bad move?
The fact they got him so cheap, it's a brilliant move.
Yeah. And what about you, Xavier?
I believe it's a brilliant move for the Saints. I also believe it's a brilliant move for Jameis Winston as a whole. You talk about a guy who many people have been writing off. I've been saying the entire time, don't write Jameis off just yet. I just believe he needs to get into the right type of system for himself where there is a lot better structure, because before Bruce Arians showed up, there wasn't good structure in Tampa Bay. Let's not even cut any corners about that. It wasn't. Dirk Koetter was an absolute disaster as a head coach. Now, as far as Jameis Winston goes personally, talk about a guy who gets to go now sit under and learn from one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I believe that is going to lead to a great redemption story for Jameis Winston in his career. As long, of course, as he goes in and he does all the things that he needs to do. And I believe that he will, because I believe that this entire process has humbled him. And I believe that the same thing will happen for guys like Cam Newton and Andy Dalton as well.
Right. Could you see Jameis Winston being the eventual successor for Drew Brees in a year or two?
It's definitely possible. I could definitely see that for sure. Because I don't believe that Taysom Hill is the answer for them at quarterback going forward at all. Remember, Scott, I actually had Jordan Love going to the New Orleans Saints in the first round. Because I thought that they would find some type of way to address that backup quarterback need. So, you lost Teddy Bridgewater. Taysom Hill's not the ideal quarterback. So you bring in Jameis Winston, who's still young. He doesn't have a huge injury history. And some of the things he needs to clean up are those interceptions. That's pretty much it. Right. So, this could really end up being one of those underrated moves that really ends up paying dividends in the end in the future.
Ryan, what's your take?
I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that I think gets forgotten about this is that Jameis Winston can now see. Now that he was practically legally blind, and his eyesight was worse than mine, and I wear glasses. And he was out there not using contacts. Now he's able to see a lot more clearly. I think that alone will upgrade his ability to play. And then now that he's learning behind someone like Drew Brees, and with Sean Payton, I think it's very good for him. I think that he very well could be the next quarterback after Drew Brees for the New Orleans Saints.
Well, I mean, he calls that place like the Harvard when it comes to learning. So, my goodness, if that isn't a high compliment, tell me what really is. So, and then finally, before we go ahead and talk about where we can contact us, let's go ahead back to Andy Dalton, guys, and then Cam Newton. Okay, give me one team, each of you, where Andy Dalton winds up.
The best place for him is New England.
Xavier?
I'm going to say Pittsburgh.
I'm going to go New England, too. I don't see Jacksonville as a fit. I don't know why. I just don't. And Cam Newton, where does he wind up?
I don't know where he winds up. I think that Jacksonville could fit for him, but I think that they're enough in the Gardner Minshew mania there. I honestly don't know where. I don't know where he ends up. If he ends up anywhere, it's as a backup.
But where? Do you have any idea?
I believe he'll be a backup quarterback going forward anyway. And I'm going to throw out a team to you guys that many people probably haven't thought about.
What's that?
I believe Cam Newton will more than likely have. Here's where I see Cam Newton next year: the backup for Deshaun Watson in Houston.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. And you know what? I'll go out on a limb on this, guys. I'll say that Cam Newton would be a good fit in Pittsburgh.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
I do.
Yep.
So, interesting stuff. We really covered it in a lot of different ways. With that said, before we close out the broadcast, okay, Xavier McKnight, lead off. Let people know how they can get a hold of you, what you're doing.
Well, before we address the contact, I want to tease to the real and the rare that we're going to have tomorrow night. Everyone tune into the show. Scott and I will be diving a little more into the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers, and Green Bay Packers saga that's going on right now, and what we believe we can expect going forward in Green Bay with that entire situation. But we will also be diving into episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance, the 10-part documentary series of the Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls of the 1990s. Episodes 3 and 4 really address the Detroit Pistons, Chicago Bulls rivalry from back in the late 80s, early 90s. Scott and I are going to get some things off our chest about the Isaiah Thomas situation, the walk-off with the Pistons, and just how we believe the truth was not completely told with that situation.
Yeah, aren't we ever, Xavier? I'll tell you what. 3 and 4 were the only ones I was going to watch. Otherwise, I'm going back to Chicago PD with my beautiful wife that night. So that's where you'll find my head. But yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's edition of The Real and the Rare. Okay, Xavier, now let everybody know where you stand, unless you got something else you want to add.
No, you can find me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. 2 I's at the end are capitalized. You can find me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. And you can friend me and follow me on Facebook as well as LinkedIn just simply by typing in Xavier McKnight, XAVIERMCKNIGHT.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, you can follow us on Twitter at Skull King Sports. We're also on Instagram again, Skull King Sports. You can go to our Facebook page, Skull King Sports. It's Facebook.com/Skull King Sports. As well as you can go to SkullKingSports.com, our main website, where we have moved on from just covering NFL and fantasy football, that we are expanding out to covering any sport that we can. So go ahead and make sure to check us out. We're already getting into some UFC coverage, as well as Major League Baseball and some NHL.
Well, and also just everybody knows that Ryan Skolrud and I have a fantasy show here on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. Some news that just came across recently: the Jacksonville Jaguars declined a fifth-year option of Leonard Fournette. So I don't know if there's a Leonard Fournette sighting. Will he be there with Cam Newton? I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, just throwing that out there, since we've certainly had a lot of information you're throwing. What's another nugget? All right, as for our contact information, first of all, you go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll see a lot of good content from our media distribution partners, as well as the writers, and that's where the broadcast will be as well. Item number 2, you can find us on Facebook at South Florida Tribune. Please like us, and then you'll get the updates as well. Item number 3, I have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Please subscribe to that. Eventually, when this pandemic goes away, I'll have a lot more videos. On Instagram, you can also reach out to us at South Florida Tribune and follow us. And of course, I have a LinkedIn profile, Scott Morganroth, on LinkedIn. And then, of course, who can forget Twitter? Scoop with 5 threes gets it done, or at Tribune South. There are lots of ways to get a hold of us. If there's anything that you want to go ahead and contact us, whether you're on Twitter or whatever the social media, you can also email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com for any feedback here on the broadcast. We look forward to getting back with you, and if we find anything that's worthwhile, we'll definitely bring it on another edition on any of our shows. So, guys, I got to tell you, it's been a lot of fun with our NFL 2020 draft coverage. These broadcasts have been fantastic because we all bring a lot of good insights and information. And I should also point out before we go off the air, and I guess you guys could probably go along with it, that we hope everybody is safe, stay home, kudos to our first responders, and practice social distancing. And we hope we've done a good job providing you with a diversion on these broadcasts, because we do our very, very best to make sure that you can use these broadcasts as a form to take your mind off of a lot of the problems that are going on. We have to stay together during this pandemic. I know it's not easy, but it's something that we have to do. Anything else you guys want to add to what I just talked about?
Just piggybacking off of everything you said, Scott. Of course, we hope that everybody is remaining safe and healthy during this time. We're almost there, guys. We're starting to see the country and more parts of the world open back up, businesses and things like that. But please continue to practice social distancing and just being smart and doing all those things that we need to do to continue to persevere and overcome through this challenging time.
Ryan.
Thank you again to all of our first responders and everything they've been doing to fight on the front lines. Again, we're getting there. I really truly believe that the end of this is coming soon.
And Ryan, since you talked about MMA through Skull King, we're going to have to talk about it. I have a guy that loves to talk MMA, so I have a feeling that you just worked your way on the Sports Exchange talking about something that you can promote on Skull King Network. So how about that? Another little bit of information. But tomorrow night, The Real and the Rare, the Motor City Mad Mouth and the X-Man. And yes, I will only talk about the 2 episodes for Jordan that I will. And of course, I'm looking forward, Xavier, tomorrow night about going into the Jordan Love pick a little bit more for those folks up in Wisconsin, the Cheesehead. So on behalf of Ryan Skolrud, Xavier McKnight, the X-Man, this is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth, wishing you a good night. We look forward to having you on the next edition of the Sports Exchange. Good night, everybody.